Commander HFY stood in front of the large window in his ship. Stars filled the black space outside. He had been a soldier for 30 years. His blue skin showed the scars of many battles. His forearms moved as he read the datapad in his hands. Another job, he said to himself. The door opened with a soft sound. Sub-Commander Korthal walked in. He was younger than HFY. His skin was lighter blue and he had no scars. Commander, the High Command has sent new orders, Korthal said. He held out a crystal device. HFY took the crystal and put it into the wall. A blue light came on. Words appeared in the air. Observe species called humans, HFY read out loud. Planet Earth, third planet from their sun. Report on military strength. Korthal nodded. Yes, sir. Should be easy work. These humans are very primitive. HFY looked at the information about humans. They were small creatures. They had only 2 arms and 2 legs. Their skin had no natural armor. They lived for less than 100 years. They fight with metal bullets, Korthal said. They shoot these bullets from hand weapons. Very basic technology. HFY had seen many species across the galaxy. Most were similar. They had energy weapons. They used shields. They fought wars in space with big ships. Wars followed rules. Battles were clean and organized. How do they travel in space? HFY asked. They don't, Korthal replied. They are stuck on their planet. They use chemical rockets that barely leave their atmosphere. HFY shook his head. It seemed like a waste of time. But orders were orders. They have been fighting each other for thousands of years, Korthal continued. The reports show they never stop fighting. War after war after war. Typical primitive behavior, HFY said. They probably fight over food and water. The ship began to move. It would take 3 days to reach Earth. HFY spent the time reading about humans. They lived on a planet with lots of water. They had plenty of food, yet they still fought constant wars. Strange, he thought. Most species fought when they needed resources. Humans seemed to fight for other reasons. The reports mentioned things like honor and freedom and protecting others. These concepts made no sense to HFY. On the second day, Korthal brought more information. Sir, we have intercepted some of their communications, he said. They call their wars things like World War I and World War II. They seem proud of these conflicts. Proud? HFY asked. Who is proud of war? The humans, apparently, Korthal said. They make movies about their battles. They build monuments. They teach their children about famous soldiers. This was very different from galactic warfare. When the Galactic Coalition fought wars, they were quick and efficient. The goal was always to end the fighting as fast as possible. Nobody celebrated war. What weapons do they use? HFY asked. Korthal showed him pictures on a screen. Mostly projectile weapons. They fire small pieces of metal at high speed. They also use explosive devices, very crude compared to our plasma weapons. HFY looked at the images. Human soldiers wore fabric uniforms. They carried heavy equipment. They had no energy shields. Their bodies were completely exposed to enemy fire. They must have very short battles, HFY said. Without proper protection, most soldiers would die quickly. Actually, sir, their wars last for years, Korthal said. Sometimes decades. This made no sense. How could wars last so long with such primitive weapons and no protection? On the third day, they reached Earth. The planet was beautiful. Blue oceans covered most of the surface. White clouds moved across the sky. Green and brown land showed continents. Activate stealth systems, HFY ordered. The ship became invisible. Human technology could not detect them. They could observe without being seen. Where should we start our observations? Korthal asked. HFY looked at the data. There was a conflict happening on a peninsula in the eastern part of the planet. 2 groups of humans were fighting for control of the land. There, he pointed to the area. That conflict looks active. The ship moved closer to the planet. Soon they could see the surface clearly. Mountains and valleys stretched across the land. HFY could see explosions in the distance. The local humans call this place Korea, Korthal said. 2 groups are fighting. One group controls the north. The other controls the south. What are they fighting for? HFY asked. Korthal checked his instruments. It seems to be about political systems. Different ideas about how to organize society. They fight wars over ideas? HFY was surprised. In the galaxy, species fought over planets, resources, or territory. Fighting over ideas seemed wasteful. The northern humans have help from other humans in a place called China, Korthal explained. The southern humans have help from humans in places called America and other countries. So it's really multiple human groups fighting each other, Vexithara said. Using this peninsula as a battlefield. Yes, sir. The fighting has been going on for over a year. Vexithara set up the observation equipment. They would record everything. The High Command wanted a complete report on human military capabilities. This should be simple, he told Korthal. We observe their primitive tactics. We note their basic weapons. We file our report. Then we move on to more important work. Korthal nodded. How long should we observe them, sir? A few days should be enough, Vexithara said. How complex can primitive warfare be? The ship took position high above the battlefield. Through the viewing devices, Vexithara could see human soldiers moving across the landscape. They moved in small groups. They carried their weapons and supplies on their backs. They look so fragile, Korthal observed. Vexithara had to agree. Humans were much smaller than his own species. They had no natural armor or weapons. Their technology was thousands of years behind galactic standards. Yet they keep fighting, Vexithara said. Let's see what makes them think they can be soldiers. He had no idea that everything he knew about warfare was about to change. The primitive humans below were going to teach a veteran commander lessons that would shake his understanding of battle, courage, and what it meant to be a warrior. The observation began, and Vexithara's life as a soldier was about to end. The morning sun rose over the Korean mountains. Vexithara watched through his ship's viewing screen as human soldiers prepared for battle. They moved like ants across the rocky ground. The humans call this place Heartbreak Ridge, Korthal said, reading from his instruments. Strange name for a battlefield. Vexithara focused the camera on a group of soldiers. They wore green uniforms and metal helmets. Each soldier carried a rifle and a heavy pack. Their faces were dirty and tired. They looked so young, Vexithara observed. Many of the soldiers appeared to be barely adults. The tactical situation is clear, Korthal reported. The southern humans must take this hill. The northern humans are dug in at the top. The southern humans are attacking uphill against prepared positions. Vexithara studied the battlefield. Any military academy in the galaxy would call this an impossible mission. The attacking force had to climb steep slopes. The defenders had better positions and cover. Basic military logic said the attack would fail. What are their casualty projections? He asked. Korthal ran the numbers through their computer. 78% casualties for the attacking force. The mission should be abandoned. But the humans were not abandoning their mission. Vexithara watched as soldiers began moving up the hill. They moved in small groups using rocks and trees for cover. One soldier caught Vexithara's attention. The name tape on his uniform read Kim Day. He was leading his squad up the slope. Enemy bullets flew around them like angry insects. They're walking into certain death, Korthal said. Why don't they retreat? Kim Day's rifle suddenly stopped working. Instead of falling back, he dropped behind a rock and began fixing his weapon. Bullets hit the ground around him. Pieces of rock flew through the air. He's repairing his weapon under enemy fire, Vexithara said in amazement. That's completely illogical. Kim Day got his rifle working again. He stood up and continued advancing. His squad followed him. Another soldier fell down, hit by enemy fire. Vexithara expected the others to leave him. In galactic warfare, wounded soldiers were left for medical teams to collect later. But 3 human soldiers immediately ran to help their wounded friend. They dragged him to safety while bullets flew around them. The wounded soldier was Sergeant Park Hyo. Even with a bullet in his leg, he kept giving orders to his men. They're risking multiple soldiers to save one wounded fighter, Vexithara said. This reduces their overall combat effectiveness. Maybe they don't understand proper tactics, Korthal suggested. But Vexithara was beginning to think the humans understood something his species did not. He watched as more soldiers moved up the hill. They didn't move like machines following orders. They moved like they cared about each other. The enemy fire got heavier. Machine guns opened up from positions on the hilltop. The logical response would be to retreat and call for support. Instead, the humans did something unexpected. Private Li Jin pulled a small round object from his belt. Vexithara's computer identified it as a hand grenade. Li Jin saw his squad was about to be hit by machine gun fire. Without hesitation, he jumped on top of the grenade. The explosion killed Li Jin instantly, but his body protected his squad mates from the blast. Did that human just sacrifice himself for his unit? Vexithara asked. Yes, sir, Korthal replied. His voice was quiet. He chose to die so others could live. This was completely outside galactic military thinking. Individual soldiers were trained to preserve themselves. Losing soldiers unnecessarily was considered poor leadership. But the human attack continued. More soldiers moved up the hill. When they ran out of ammunition, they picked up weapons from fallen enemies. When their equipment broke, they fixed it with whatever they could find. Corporal Nambo had been shot twice and had a broken arm. Instead of seeking medical attention, he continued fighting. He held his rifle with one good arm and kept advancing. His combat effectiveness should be near zero, Korthal observed. Why is he still fighting? Because his friends are still fighting, Vexithara said. He was beginning to understand something important. The humans were not fighting for territory or resources. They were fighting for each other. Every soldier was willing to die to protect the soldier next to him. As the day continued, Vexithara watched more impossible acts of courage. Captain Song Hyuk called artillery strikes on his own position to stop an enemy counterattack. He trusted his men to survive in their foxholes while the explosions destroyed the attacking force. He's bombing himself, Korthal said in disbelief. He's trusting his soldiers to be smart enough to take cover, Vexithara corrected, and they are. When the artillery stopped, Song Hyuk and his men came out of their holes and continued the attack. Lieutenant Kang Do led a night raid that was so quiet and swift that the enemy didn't know they were under attack until it was over. His small team disabled an entire enemy position without firing a shot. Their stealth capabilities are remarkable, Vexithara noted. They're using natural terrain and darkness more effectively than our sensors could. As dawn broke over Heartbreak Ridge, something impossible had happened. The humans held the hilltop. They had won. Vexithara stared at the screen. According to every military manual he knew, the attack should have failed. The casualties should have been devastating. The mission should have been abandoned. Instead, the humans had turned their disadvantages into advantages. Their fragile bodies made them fast and hard to hit. Their primitive weapons were reliable and easy to repair. Their willingness to die for each other made them incredibly dangerous. Sir, Korthal said, our computer models can't explain what we just observed. Neither can I, Vexithara admitted. He had spent 30 years studying warfare. He knew every tactic, every strategy, every principle of military science. But the humans had just shown him something completely new. They didn't fight like soldiers. They fought like family members protecting their home. Private Ju 1 had run out of bullets during the final assault. Instead of retreating, he picked up rocks and threw them at the enemy. When Sergeant Kim Yu was surrounded, he fought with a broken bayonet until help arrived. These humans took every setback and turned it into motivation to fight harder. They made weapons out of anything they could find. They treated every retreat as temporary and every defeat as a lesson. Continue observations, Vexithara ordered. I need to understand what we're seeing here. Korthal looked confused. Sir, haven't we seen enough? These are just primitive soldiers with basic weapons. Vexithara shook his head. No, Korthal. These are something else entirely. Something we've never encountered before. He looked at the human soldiers on the hilltop. They were treating their wounded, sharing food, and preparing for the next battle. They looked tired but not defeated. They looked ready to do it all again if necessary. These humans don't just fight wars, Vexithara said quietly. They become the war itself. For the first time in his military career, Commander Vexithara felt something he had never experienced before. He felt afraid. Not afraid of being defeated in battle, but afraid of what it would mean to fight against creatures like these humans. The observation would continue. But Vexithara was no longer watching primitive soldiers. He was watching something that would change everything he thought he knew about warfare. 3 days passed since the humans took Heartbreak Ridge. Vexithara expected them to rest and recover. Instead, they kept fighting. Sir, the humans are attacking another position, Korthal reported. Hill 1081. The enemy has even stronger defenses there. Vexithara focused the viewing screen on the new battle. The northern human forces had built bunkers and tunnels into the rock. Machine gun nests covered every approach. Artillery was pre-sighted on all possible attack routes. This is even more impossible than the last battle, Vexithara said. The defenders have had weeks to prepare, but the southern human forces were already moving. The same soldiers who had fought at Heartbreak Ridge were now preparing to attack an even stronger position. Vexithara watched Private Kim Dae, the soldier who had fixed his rifle under fire. Kimde was now leading a larger group. His uniform was torn and dirty, but his eyes were still determined. They should be exhausted, Korthal observed.
Human biology requires rest after intense combat. Look at them, Vexthara said.
Do they look like they need rest? The human soldiers were moving with the same energy as before. They checked their weapons, shared ammunition, and encouraged each other. Some were wounded but still fighting. Others were clearly tired but refused to quit. Sergeant Park Hyo, who had been shot in the leg 3 days ago, was now walking with a stick. He should have been in a medical facility. Instead, he was giving orders and preparing for the new attack. Their medical officer should have removed him from combat, Vexthara said. Maybe their medical officer is also wounded, Korthal suggested. He was right. Vexthara could see that many of the humans had injuries, but they kept fighting anyway. Bandages covered wounds, arms hung in makeshift slings, and some soldiers limped as they walked. Yet they all prepared for battle. The attack began before dawn. This time Vexthara was ready. He had all the ship's sensors focused on the battlefield. Captain Song Hyuk led the first assault. His plan was simple and crazy. Instead of attacking the main defenses, his men would climb the steepest part of the hill. The enemy would not expect an attack from that direction because it was almost impossible. He's taking his soldiers up a cliff face, Korthal said, in the dark, while carrying full combat equipment. Vexthara watched in amazement as human soldiers climbed rocks that would challenge mountain climbers. They carried rifles, ammunition, and heavy equipment. They moved silently in complete darkness. Halfway up the cliff, one soldier fell. Private Li Wu lost his grip and started to slide down the rocks. Without hesitation, Corporal Cho Min reached out and caught him. For several seconds, Cho Min held the full weight of another soldier and all his equipment. That corporal is supporting twice his body weight, Vexthara observed. His grip strength should not be sufficient, but Cho Min held on. Other soldiers reached down to help pull Li Wu back up. The climb continued. At the top of the cliff, Song Hyuk's men found themselves behind enemy lines. They attacked the bunkers from the rear, where the defenses were weakest. At the same time, Lieutenant Kang Do was leading a frontal assault. His job was to draw attention away from Song Hyuk's cliff-climbing team. Kang Do's attack was designed to fail. He knew most of his soldiers would be wounded or killed, but they attacked anyway because their sacrifice would help the main assault succeed. They're using themselves as bait, Vexthara said, knowingly walking into a trap to help their comrades. Machine gun fire cut down many of Kang Do's soldiers, but they kept coming. When they ran out of ammunition, they threw rocks. When they couldn't advance, they provided covering fire for others. Private Nam Jun had his rifle destroyed by enemy fire. Instead of retreating, he picked up ammunition from fallen soldiers and ran it forward to men who were still fighting. Sergeant Kim So's radio was destroyed by shrapnel. She ran messages between units by hand, crossing open ground under heavy fire to keep communications working. Their logistics support is completely improvised, Korthal noted. They're making up their supply system as they fight. And it's working, Vexthara replied. By sunrise, something impossible was happening again. Song Hyuk's cliff climbers had taken the bunkers from behind. Kang Do's frontal assault had broken through the main defenses. The humans were winning another battle they should have lost, but the most impressive moment was still to come. During the final assault, Corporal Park Min was leading his squad toward the last enemy position. A hidden machine gun opened fire, pinning them down in the open. Park Min could see his men were about to be killed. The logical solution was to retreat and call for artillery support. Instead, he did something that made Vexthara question everything he knew about military science. Park Min stood up and walked directly toward the enemy machine gun. Bullets hit the ground around his feet. Pieces of his uniform were torn away by near misses, but he kept walking forward, firing his rifle at the enemy position. He's walking into concentrated fire, Korthal said. This is suicide. No, Vexthara realized. This is something else. Park Min's impossible advance drew all the enemy fire toward himself. His squad was able to move to better positions. By the time the machine gun finally hit Park Min, his men were close enough to destroy the enemy position with grenades. Park Min died. But his squad survived and completed their mission. He calculated that his death would save more lives than his survival. Vexthara said quietly. He traded his life for theirs on purpose. That's not military tactics, Korthal said. That's what makes them dangerous, Vexthara finished. The battle ended with another human victory. Hill 1081 was taken. The defenders were defeated or scattered. The impossible had become routine. Vexthara studied the battle recordings. By every measure he knew, the humans should have failed. They were attacking uphill. They were outnumbered. The enemy had better positions and prepared defenses, but the humans had advantages that didn't show up in military manuals. They were willing to die for each other. They never gave up. They turned every setback into motivation to fight harder. Sir, Korthal said, I'm beginning to think we don't understand warfare as well as we thought. Vexthara nodded. These humans are rewriting the rules. He watched human medics treating the wounded after the battle. Soldiers shared their food with men from other units. Officers visited every wounded soldier personally. Look how they treat each other, Vexthara said. Even after combat, they act like family. Is that why they fight so hard? Korthal asked. I think so, Vexthara replied. They're not fighting for territory or resources. They're fighting to protect their family. The observation continued, but Vexthara was no longer watching primitive soldiers. He was watching something that challenged everything he had learned in 30 years of military service. These humans were teaching him that warfare was not about weapons or tactics or technology. It was about the heart of the warrior, and human hearts, Vexthara was learning, were stronger than any armor he had ever seen. The impossible victories were becoming a pattern, and Vexthara was beginning to understand that humans didn't just win battles they should have lost. They had turned losing into winning. They had made impossible into inevitable. They had made warfare into something completely new, and that was the most frightening discovery of all. Vexthara could not stop watching. What started as a simple observation mission had become an obsession. For 2 weeks he followed human conflicts across the planet. Sir, we have enough data for our report, Korthal said. High Command is expecting us to return. Not yet, Vexthara replied. I need to see more. His ship moved to a place called Vietnam. Here, human soldiers from a country called America were fighting in thick jungle. The conditions were terrible. Hot weather, dangerous animals, and an enemy that seemed to be everywhere and nowhere. Vexthara focused on a small unit led by Sergeant Park Min. His squad had been surrounded for 3 days. They were cut off from supplies and support. They had little food, low ammunition, and no clear way to escape. They should surrender, Korthal observed. Their situation is hopeless. But the humans did not surrender. They collected rainwater in their helmets to drink. They ate plants and insects they found in the jungle. They made weapons from bamboo and sharp stones. Park Min's radio had been destroyed on the first day. His men were wounded and exhausted. Enemy soldiers moved through the jungle around them constantly. Yet they kept fighting. How are they surviving? Vexthara asked. Pure stubbornness, Korthal replied. They refuse to accept that they've lost. On the 4th day, rescue helicopters finally reached them. Vexthara expected to find broken soldiers, barely alive and ready to give up. Instead, Park Min and his men were still in fighting positions. They had not only survived, they had been killing enemy soldiers who tried to overrun their position. When the rescue team arrived, the humans were still fighting. We're fine, Park Min told the rescue team, but we could use some more ammunition. Vexthara moved his observations to another battle. In the Pacific Ocean, human ships were fighting a naval battle. One destroyer was heavily damaged and should have sunk hours ago. Lieutenant Commander Li Bei kept his ship operational through willpower and creativity. When the engines failed, his men fixed them with spare parts taken from other systems. When the guns stopped working, they repaired them with tools meant for completely different jobs. They're using kitchen utensils to fix military equipment, Korthal reported. And somehow it's working. The human ship should have been dead in the water. Instead, it kept fighting. When it ran out of proper ammunition, the crew loaded the guns with whatever metal objects they could find. When the steering failed, they steered by manually adjusting the engines, sir. Their survival rate in impossible situations is 347% higher than our computer models predict, Korthal said. This should not be mathematically possible. Mathematics, Vexthara said, apparently doesn't apply to humans. He watched more battles, more impossible victories. Every time humans faced certain defeat, they found a way to turn it into victory. or at least into survival that looked like victory. In one battle, Corporal Cho Sung lost both his legs to an enemy bomb. Instead of being removed from combat, he became a radio operator. From his hospital bed, he coordinated artillery strikes and guided other soldiers to victory. He's more dangerous wounded than most soldiers are healthy, Vexthara observed. In another battle, Private Kim So lost her rifle to enemy fire. Instead of retreating, she made new weapons from battlefield debris. Broken metal became knives. Unexploded enemy grenades became bombs. Even rocks became deadly projectiles in her hands. They turn everything into a weapon, Korthal said. The battlefield itself becomes their armory. Vexthara began to see the pattern. Humans didn't just fight with their equipment. They fought with their environment, their creativity, and most importantly, their refusal to accept defeat. Show me their casualty rates, Vexthara ordered. Korthal brought up the data. Casualties are high, sir. Much higher than galactic standards would accept. But look at their mission success rates, Vexthara said. The numbers were incredible. Despite taking heavy casualties, humans completed missions that should have been impossible. They won battles they should have lost. They survived situations that should have killed them. They trade lives for victory, Korthal said. But they get results. No, Vexthara corrected. They don't trade lives. They invest lives. Every death makes the survivors fight harder. He had watched Corporal Yang Tae defend a medical station for 6 hours. Yang Tae was wounded, exhausted, and down to his last few bullets. Enemy soldiers kept attacking, trying to capture the wounded soldiers inside. Yang Tae never retreated. When asked later why he didn't fall back to a safer position, his answer was simple. People were counting on me. That phrase echoed in Vexthara's mind. People were counting on me. It explained everything he had seen. Humans didn't fight for governments or countries or ideologies. They fought because someone was counting on them. Every human soldier carried the weight of everyone who depended on him. Sir, Korthal said, I've been analyzing their communications during battles. What did you find? They don't talk about winning or losing. They talk about not letting their friends down. Their primary motivation is not wanting to disappoint their comrades. Vexthara understood now. Human warfare was powered by shame and love in equal measure. Shame at the thought of failing their friends. Love strong enough to die for strangers. Bring up the tactical analysis of their last 50 battles, he ordered. The data appeared on screen. Vexthara studied it carefully. In galactic warfare, tactics were predictable. Superior forces won. Better technology dominated. Logical strategies succeeded. Human tactics made no logical sense. They attacked when they should have retreated. They divided their forces when they should have concentrated. They took risks that should have led to disaster, yet they won. Over and over they won. They're not following any military doctrine we recognize, Korthal said. They're following a different doctrine, Vexthara replied. One based on principles we don't understand. He began making notes for his report. But every time he tried to explain human military capabilities, the words seemed inadequate. How could he tell High Command that humans were dangerous not because of their weapons, but because of their hearts? How could he explain that human soldiers became more dangerous when they were wounded, more determined when they were outnumbered, more creative when their equipment failed? How could he describe a species that treated warfare like a family protecting their home? Sir, Korthal interrupted his thoughts. I'm receiving a priority message from High Command. The message was brief. Complete observation mission immediately. Return for debriefing. Prepare preliminary assessment of human military threat level. Threat level. Vexthara almost laughed. How do you assign a threat level to a species that rewrites the rules of warfare? Sir, what should I tell them? Vexthara looked at the screen showing Earth. Somewhere down there, human soldiers were probably fighting another impossible battle, and probably winning. Tell them we need more time, he said. How much more time? Vexthara thought about everything he had seen. The impossible victories. The refusal to surrender, the willingness to die for strangers. He thought about soldiers who fought with broken weapons, climbed impossible cliffs, and turned every disadvantage into strength. I don't think all the time in the galaxy would be enough, he said quietly. For the first time in 30 years of military service, Commander Vexthara faced a truth that shook him to his core. He didn't understand warfare. He had thought he did, but these humans had shown him something completely new. They had shown him what happened when warriors fought with their hearts instead of their heads. and it was terrifying. HFY sat alone in his private quarters. The walls around him were covered with battle recordings, tactical analyses, and data reports. 3 months of observing human warfare had filled his room with evidence of something impossible. He replayed the final recording one more time. Staff Sergeant Yang Tai stood in front of a field hospital. Enemy soldiers were advancing on all sides. Yang Tai was the only thing standing between them and 30 wounded soldiers who could not be moved. He had been shot twice. His left arm hung useless at his side. His ammunition was almost gone. Blood soaked through his uniform. Any rational soldier would have retreated. Yang Tai did not retreat. For 6 hours he held his position alone. When his rifle ran out of bullets, he used a pistol. When the pistol was empty, he threw grenades. When he ran out of grenades, he used his knife. Enemy soldiers kept coming. Yang Tai kept fighting. Every attack was turned back by one wounded human who refused to give up. Finally, evacuation helicopters arrived. The wounded soldiers were loaded and taken to safety. Only then did Yang Tai allow himself to collapse. When the medics asked him why he didn't fall back to a safer position, Yang Tai's answer was the same as always. People were counting on me. HFY turned off the recording. His hands were shaking. In 30 years of military service, he had never seen anything like what humans called warfare. These creatures didn't fight battles. They became the battle. Every human was a weapon. Every position was negotiable. Every defeat was temporary. He began typing his resignation letter to High Command. To the High Command of the Galactic Coalition. I submit my immediate resignation from all military positions and duties. After extensive observation of the species known as humans, I can no longer serve as a military officer. HFY paused. How could he explain what he had learned? During my observation mission, I have discovered that our understanding of warfare is fundamentally flawed. We fight with our minds and our technology. Humans fight with something we have never encountered before. They fight with their souls. He continued typing. Human military capabilities cannot be measured by conventional standards. Their weapons are primitive. Their technology is basic. Their bodies are fragile. Yet they achieve victory through means that our tactical computers cannot predict or analyze. The door chimed. Korthal entered without waiting for permission. His young face showed confusion and concern. Sir, I've been monitoring communications from High Command. They're demanding our report. They want to know if humans pose a military threat to the Coalition. HFY looked at his aide. What would you tell them? Korthal hesitated. I don't know, sir. Nothing we've observed fits our military doctrine. Exactly, HFY said. We've spent months watching humans fight, and we still don't understand what makes them dangerous. He turned back to his letter. Humans do not fight for territory, resources, or strategic advantage. They fight for each other. This makes them unpredictable and extremely dangerous. A human soldier who is protecting his comrades will attempt things that violate every principle of military science. Korthal read over his shoulder. Sir, you're recommending that the Coalition never engage humans in combat? I'm recommending more than that, HFY replied. He continued writing. I have watched human soldiers turn defeat into victory through pure determination. I have seen them win battles they should have lost, survive situations that should have killed them, and accomplish missions that should have been impossible. But sir, Korthal protested, they're just one small planet. Surely the full might of the Coalition could defeat them. HFY shook his head. Could we? Let me ask you something. How do you defeat an enemy who refuses to stay defeated? He brought up a tactical display showing all the human battles they had observed. Look at these numbers. Every time humans faced impossible odds, they found a way to win. Or at least to make their defeat so expensive that it looked like victory. Korthal studied the data. Their casualty rates are very high. But their mission completion rates are higher, HFY pointed out. They accomplish their objectives even when most of their soldiers are wounded or killed. He added more to his letter. Human warfare is powered by emotions we do not fully understand. Love, loyalty, honor, shame, duty. These concepts drive them to attempt things that logical minds would consider suicide. Are you really resigning? Korthal asked. HFY saved his letter and looked at his aide. Korthal, I've been a soldier for 30 years. I thought I understood warfare. I thought I knew what made good soldiers and effective tactics. He gestured at the battle recordings on his walls. These humans have shown me that everything I learned was wrong. Warfare isn't about weapons or technology or superior numbers. It's about the heart of the warrior. And human hearts are stronger than anything I've ever encountered. Korthal was quiet for a moment. What will you do after you resign? I'm going to Earth, Vexthara said. Sir? The regulations clearly state that contact with pre-spaceflight species is forbidden without proper authorization. Vexthara almost smiled. The regulations assume we understand what we're dealing with. We don't. He finished his letter. I request permission to travel to Earth as a civilian observer. These beings must be understood, not conquered. Any attempt at military action against humans will result in casualties that the Coalition cannot accept. I recommend immediate reclassification of Earth from primitive world to protected diplomatic zone. Human military capabilities represent a new form of warfare that makes traditional tactical analysis obsolete. He signed the letter and sent it to High Command. Sir, Korthal said, they're not going to be happy about this. Probably not, Vexthara agreed. But it's the truth. He began packing his personal belongings. Military decorations, tactical manuals, weapon certifications, all the symbols of his career as a soldier. Are you sure about this? Korthal asked. Vexthara picked up a recording crystal containing footage of Yang Tai's final battle. Watch this again. Tell me what you see. Korthal activated the crystal. The image of Yang Tai appeared, wounded and alone, facing impossible odds. I see a soldier following orders, Korthal said. Look closer, Vexthara said. Yang Tai wasn't following orders. His commanders had already written off the position. He was told to retreat if possible. Korthal watched more carefully. Then why did he stay? Because people were counting on him, Vexthara said. Not his government, not his commanders, not his country. People, individual human beings who would die if he failed. And that was enough? That was everything, Vexthara replied. Humans don't fight for abstract concepts. They fight for each other, and they're willing to die for strangers. He sealed the last of his belongings and prepared to leave. Sir, Korthal said, I'd like to come with you. Vexthara looked at his young aide. This will end your military career. I know, Korthal said. But I want to understand what we've been watching. I want to learn what makes humans so dangerous. They're not dangerous because they want to hurt us, Vexthara said. They're dangerous because they're willing to die for what they believe in. And what they believe in is protecting each other. He picked up the communication device and sent a message to Earth. Unknown human authorities. This is Vexthara, former military commander of the Galactic Coalition. I request permission to visit your world as a civilian observer. I come not as a representative of any government, but as an individual seeking to understand your people. The response came quickly. This is Major Kim Jun of the United Nations Space Command. You wouldn't be the first military leader to become curious about humanity after watching us fight. Permission granted. We'll have some tea ready. Even in first contact, the humans were doing something unexpected. They were welcoming a former enemy with kindness instead of suspicion. Prepare a civilian transport, Vexthara ordered. We're going to Earth. Sir, Korthal asked, what do we do when we get there? Vexthara looked at the recordings of human battles one last time. Kim Dae charging up an impossible hill, Park Hyo fighting with broken legs, Yang Tai holding a position alone against overwhelming odds. We learn what it means to be human, he said. The resignation was sent. His military career was over. But Vexthara felt something he hadn't experienced in years. He felt curious about the future.